Now, where we left off, we had just added a user, and we had used the roles-based controls, authorization controls for access and things like that. And now we're going to change a view, because if we look here, if we want to create users, we got these two fields here which can be filled in automatically. A user wouldn't fill in the date that it was created, it would just be the current date. We also need to be able to add the role here. Select what role. Every user should have a role. So we want to have that here. So we're going to change some views. Now I want to point out here, you notice that it's users create. And that relates exactly to this action here. Again, this is a very specific word, action create. It gets parsed and says I'm going to go into this method right here. Now there are some other methods here. For example, if I want to say list the users, you can see that it's users index, and it just goes to this action right here, and it's going to render that page. Okay. Now there are some actions that require a parameter. So for example, this action view here is expecting a parameter ID and 1, and if I go up here to view, you'll see that it is expecting ID to be passed into it, and in this case we're passing in an ID of 1. If I pass 2, I know I don't have any users 2. It says I can't find that page. If I just hit view like this and don't have any parameters, it says your request is invalid. If I say, for example, my ID 1, again, your request is invalid. So be clear that these are the actions inside the controller. Notice it, action, controller, module. Okay? And then these are the parameters that follow. And a lot of this is parsed by the URL manager that we implemented. So let's go back to admin. Here it's showing this user right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to create users, and I'm going to change this view, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to encrypt this password both when I save it and also when I confirm the user's identity. So we're going back to the controller here, and we're going to go to this create function. Now this says that if there's a post command, I'm going to do something. Other than that, what we're saying is that, oh, there's nothing that goes along with this, so that we're just going to show the create module. So we're going to render the create view. Remember that we are in the administration module where the controller users controller is found and the users view is found. Now if we go to this create module here, it sets up your breadcrumbs and your menu, and then it says render partial, I'll get into that later, underscore form. Now this could have been better named, but it is the default, so I'm going to leave it because then I'll remember what goes with what. But it's this one right here, and you see that here is what is being displayed. Now I already said that I don't want these, so I'll just very easily just delete those. And when I save this and go back to create users, they're gone. Okay, that was pretty simple, but now we want to be able to add the role selection, so that's going to take a little bit more work. So what I've added to this after the last div was a drop down. Now this form right here was already created because we have our break into the HTML code, this PHP form. So we created a form variable right here. And so there we can use it from then on out and set the parameters of the form. And we're saying now what we're going to do is we're going to add a form part. We're going to add a drop-down list. And the first thing we're going to do is give it a label of role. And this drop-down list is going to get all of its item from auth item model. Remember, we created that model, and that's why we created it. And so we're going to say show us all the auth items, and then we'll be able to select it and pass it on. So let's see what happens here when we view that. We now have this auth item selection. And you can see product manager and super user are my only options. And if I was to add, for example, a different type of So let's say that I was going to add another item here. I can insert, we only got product manager and super user. And I could say, well, there's just a regular user. Why not? Should be a regular user with no rights, essentially. And we'll just create that item there. And then when I go over to my thing, if I hit refresh, you now see it's there, and it's reading from the database. So that will then allow me to assign a role to a person. Now I got this create, and it seems like the create should go after the role selection there. So you can see that here is where I've got my submit button. I'll just cut and paste that down below this. This ends the widget that we've got here. Here is the beginning of the widget, which is the form again. So save. And we've got exactly what we want here. Now this won't work to create a user because I have two required fields that I'm not adding, and I don't do anything with this. So we need to go over to our controller, and here in our controller is where we will end up. So it's going to set, are there any post commands? And in this case, once we hit the create, it will say, yes, there are some post commands. And so now this is where I'm going to enter the code. Now, the default is just pick up all of the attributes that match under the users array and put them into the model and then save it. But we have some other things that we want to add. So starting from scratch here, we'll first of all get a new users model variable that we can use. And then we're also going to get an auth item model because we're going to want to create and get information about the authentication tables. So the only reason we're going to enter this is because there is a post command users, meaning that we've actually entered some stuff on the form. And we're going to say, first of all, load into the model all of the attributes. For example, here the username and password and display name will be attributes that would be put right into the model. Up here we only just created it, now we're putting in attributes to the model that we can then save. First thing we want to check is to say, do we have any models out there, or do we have any entries in the database where the username already exists? If it does, then if it does, we don't want to continue because we don't want someone to have the same username. Now, the database will also stop us from doing that, so there's probably a better way to handle this, but you'll see what we do here. So we're only going to say if this username doesn't exist, continue on. Now we're going to say, instead of, we have already the model with the password, but we're going to change it. We're going to say, take that model password and crypt it. Now this is a PHP command, and we're just doing a basic salt here. You can get into a lot better encryption, but this is a very simple one to do. And now we're going to say that the date created is this SQL expression now. No need, of course, to have the user enter in now. And now we're going to try to save the model. Now, when we save the, if the model is successful in saving, then we're going to say, are there any auth items? Now, the only auth item here that we have is this role here, which will select one. You know, in this case, we may want to say super user, whatever. And then we'll say, okay, well, get it in that. Okay, so I'm going to get the things that were in the auth item. In this case, it's just going to be the role. And now I'm going to create a new auth assignment. Remember that the assignment table is where we assign an actual role. So the super user is from user ID 1. So this is the entry in the table that actually needs to be made. So from that auth assignment, I am going to get the item name. In this case, the item name is the role, because you see here in auth item under name, that is the role. Okay. And then I'm going to set the user ID from the model, and I'm going to save it. After I save it, I can close that, and this says, well, if there weren't any auth items, then just go right back to viewing the current user. Close up all of that, and then finally add the little rendering of the create form view, because we haven't posted any commands, so we're assuming that you're going to create. So let's see how this works, and see, hopefully it will work. Kurt Clement, of course, will fail because we already have that user. So we'll go Kim Clement, and I'm going to put password there, and I'm going to just say that she is a user. Okay, now last updated cannot be blank, and I did this so that you could see where this takes. Now we obviously did the date created, but last updated cannot be blank. Well, let's go to our controller. Let's go to our model. So if we go to our models and we go to our users model, this was created by the G tool, and one of the rules here is what's required. Now it got it from the database, so that's what it assumed, and what we can do is change this last updated. I'm just going to delete it and save it. Now when I do it again, Kim Clement, password, user, create. Beautiful. And look at, even though I put the password there, you can see that it's encrypted. So now when I list the users, I read from the database. I got Kurt Clement with password and Kim Clement with this strange password here. Well, what that means is if I log out, log in, the Kim Clement password, it's going to fail because it doesn't match. So all I have to do is go over to my user identity, if you remember, in my components, and now what I'm going to say is that this password has to match the encrypted password. So by adding the encryption of the password that you enter on the form, I'm going to say when I encrypt this password that you entered in the form, it should match the one that I stored in the database that I encrypted, and of course that the salt there is the same. And I just put that there for reference. Of course, salt can be anything, and there's some better encryption that you may want to do. So if I save this, and now I say log in, Kim Clement, it logs in just fine. Now remember, she's a user, so if I go to administration /users, she's not authorized to perform this action because she hasn't been given the role of super user, which is the only person who can do this. And here's another conundrum now. When I go back to log in as Kurt Clement with password, it doesn't remember because it's gonna say I tried to encrypt password and it didn't match. So I'm going to have to create give Kim Clement a new role and start over from there. You can see how I can fix this.